today's video is the very first upload of Halloween week. And if you missed out on my last video, what that is just every day for 7 days up until the day of Halloween, I will be uploading a video that's revolving around creepy conspiracies, murders, serial killers, just very Halloweenish things. I'm really excited about it, and if you are too, stay tuned for the rest of the week where I'll be uploading a video every single day. But as for today's video, it is going to be about Richard Chase, otherwise known as the Vampire of Sacramento. Richard Chase was born on May 23rd of 1950, and he actually started showing signs of mental illness at a very, very young age. His father, who was a very strict disciplinary and was said to maybe have been abusive to Richard, did very little to get him any kind of help. Chase was very disturbed and definitely unhappy as a child, and his symptoms only began to worsen once he hit adolescence. He set several small fires, frequently wet the bed, and showed a lot of aggression and cruelty towards animals. Those three habits, sometimes called the McDonald's triad or the triad of sociopathy, were used to be a predictor of sociopathy in a patient. For some reason, Chase had really weird beliefs about himself and people around him. Chase believed that Nazis were trying to turn his blood into powder. Chase's problems only got worse once his father allegedly kicked him out of his home. And without any supervision, Chase really quickly turned to alcohol and drug abuse. And once he started to get into substance abuse, the drugs enhanced his symptoms of mental illness to a whole new level. He soon was convinced that his heart stopped beating on several occasions, and he also believed at times that he was a walking corpse, like that he was not alive at all. But apparently, occasionally being dead was no reason to neglect his health. So, fearing that he lacked vitamin D, he pressed whole oranges into his forehead, believing that his brain would absorb the nutrients from the pill and I guess get the nutrients directly. And one of Chase's strongest delusions and most powerful delusions actually involved his skull. He thought that his cranial bone had split apart and began to shift underneath his skin. And he said that it was changing places and jumbling like a jigsaw puzzle. So he shaved his head in efforts to monitor the movement of his cranial bones. And then, unsurprisingly, at the age of 25, Richard Chase was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and he was institutionalized in 1975 to prevent him from becoming a further danger to himself or others. And at the psychiatric hospital, Chase's fascination with blood really quickly got him the nickname Dracula. There were several assistants at this psychiatric hospital who witnessed Chase killing birds and attempting to drain the blood and drink it from them. He said that he drank the blood of the birds to get rid of the poison that he believed was injected into him by the Nazis to turn his blood to powder. That's just a very strange delusion and a really strange fix for it if you think that that's happening to you. In addition to that, he actually attempted to inject himself with rabbit's blood, which actually caused him to be violently ill. And that is what actually resulted in Chase's institutionalization. In spite of similar incidents, the staff believed that they had rehabilitated Chase, and they released him to live with his mother. However, that ended up being a pretty fatal decision that the psychiatric hospital made, because Chase's condition wasn't improving. It was actually growing worse day by day. And even though he had been released into his mother's care, there was nothing that was legally binding him to his mother. And not long after this release, he actually moved away from his mother's house because, once again, he believed that his mother was poisoning him and tried to kill him. He then moved into an apartment with a group of people that he called his friends, but it seemed that they didn't really know Chase all that well. because when his unusual behavior persisted with his drug abuse, they said that it left Chase really, really high and walking around the apartment without any clothes on. So they then asked him to leave. But Chase, however, refused to leave the apartment, and during his path of resistance, his friends actually ended up abandoning the apartment. So once again, Chase was living on his own, and that circumstance for Chase always made his symptoms of his condition increase and get worse. So his fascination with blood resurfaced at this point, and he began again capturing and killing small animals. He would eat them raw or blend their organs together with soda and drink the mixture. I'm not sure what his logic was behind that, why he did it, but he definitely did do that. In August of 1977, Nevada police actually found him in the Lake Tahoe area, covered in blood and carrying a bucket that had a liver in it. But since they determined that this blood and the organ belonged to a cow, they let Chase go. So yet again, Chase slipped through the system and he wasn't getting any help. So very quickly, Chase fell deeply into the power of his delusions, which encouraged him to do something unthinkable. So on December 29th of 1977, Richard Chase was frustrated and lonely, and his mother hadn't allowed him to come home for Christmas, and he said that he was mad. So on that day in 1977, Chase fired his .22 caliber pistol into somebody's home through the kitchen, but no one was harmed, but it did spark something in him. So 2 days later, Chase claimed his first victim. His victim was a 51-year-old man named Ambrose Griffin. He was helping his wife bring in the groceries whenever he became his victim. While Chase was driving by, he pulled out his .22 caliber pistol and shot him straight into the chest. And that was the beginning of Chase's obsession. And then on January 23rd of 1978, Chase entered the home of Teresa Wallen, who was pregnant at the time and had accidentally left her door unlocked. He said during the interrogation that he felt that the door being unlocked was an invitation for him to come inside, and he somehow believed that that justified what he did to her. And from that point forward, all of his victims were people who had left their door unlocked. Richard Chase shot Tara Wallen 3 times using the same gun that he had used to shoot Ambrose Griffin. He then raped her after she died of her injuries, and then Chase proceeded to stab her over and over again with a butcher knife before cutting out her organs and drinking the blood from her body. He then went on to bathe in her blood, and he finished up the crime by sticking dog feces in the mouth of the corpse. He reportedly used a yogurt container as a cup to drink the blood out of. Chase's final murders were some of the most gruesome of all of his murders. On January 27th of 1978, just 4 days after the Wallens murder, Chase found himself at a woman named Evelyn's front door. It was unlocked, and inside was her 6-year-old son, Jason, her 22-month-old nephew, David, and also a friend from across the way named Dan. With the same gun from the other murders, he shot Dan in the head, killing him immediately. Meredith was murdered in the hallway. She died from a gunshot wound to the head. Chase then stole her car keys. Evelyn and Jason were found in Evelyn's bedroom, and the little boy had been shot twice in the head. Evelyn was partially cannibalized. Her stomach was cut open and she had multiple organs that were missing. There was also a failed attempt to remove one of her eyes. In addition to all of those injuries, her body was also sodomized. And the baby, David, whom Evelyn was babysitting at the time, was missing from the scene of the crime. The child's decapitated corpse was found a few months later behind a church in a box. Then the story of what happened that night emerged during Chase's trial. He said that there was a knock of a visitor at the door and it scared him, so he took off with the baby's body and he got inside of Meredith's car. That's when the visitor alerted the cops, and the authorities were able to identify Chase's footprint beside her bed that were in her blood. When the police searched Chase's apartment, he found that all of his utensils were stained with blood, and his fridge actually contained human brains. And then it was at that point that Chase was arrested. The trial of the Vampire of Sacramento began on January 2nd of 1979, and the trial lasted for 5 long months. The defense attorneys rejected the death penalty on the grounds that Chase was not guilty by reason of insanity. In the end, after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury took the side of the prosecution, and Richard Chase, the Vampire of Sacramento, was found guilty on 6 counts of murder and sentenced to death by a gas chamber. His fellow inmates were very, very aware of the crimes that he had committed and were very frightened by him. So at that time, they started to encourage him to kill himself. I guess because they didn't want to be around him, and they knew that he had psychological issues. And I'm sure that they knew that if they said it enough, that he probably would go through with it. So Richard Chase did just what they suggested. For months, Chase started stockpiling the anti-anxiety medicine that he was given by the jail, and he did that until he had enough to go through a fatal overdose. He was then found dead in his cell the day after Christmas in 1980. So Chase ended up spending a little over a year in prison before he killed himself, and I'm sure he knew, that he was going to die anyways. I'm not sure exactly where he was buried or any of that information. I tried to find if maybe he had any last words or any last request or anything of that nature, maybe if he left a note, but there was no further information on that. I did think that this case was really, really interesting, and I know that this is kind of a shorter video, and my last week's video was also a shorter video than normal, but I just found this case so intriguing and wanted to put it on my channel, and I thought, what better time than this week to put a vampire case on my channel. I mean, absolutely no disrespect to any of the victims I talked about, and I know that I didn't give a warning in the beginning of the video that this did have some graphic parts in it, and I apologize for that. I tried not to go too into detail about what happened to the bodies. I just kind of did a brief overview for the most part. There was a lot more to it than that, and a lot that I kind of wish I didn't read. But that is all of the information that I do have for you guys on this case. I enjoyed researching it, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Come back tomorrow for a new video for Halloween week. Thank you!